You know that sinking feeling when you study all night, and by next week, it's like you never opened the book? Meanwhile, Japanese students master thousands of complex characters and retain them for decades. Today, I'm pulling back the curtain on their exact system, and trust me, this isn't what you think. If you're ready to transform how your brain stores information, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe because we're diving deep into techniques that actually work. Here's what nobody tells you about memory. Your brain isn't broken. You're not inherently bad at remembering things. The problem is you're fighting against your biology instead of working with it. In Japanese students, they've cracked the code through a system refined over generations. Let me paint you a picture. Walk into any Japanese high school and you'll find students who can write, read, and contextualize over 2,000 kanji characters. These aren't simple letters. Each character is a miniature artwork with multiple pronunciations, various meanings depending on context, and specific stroke orders that must be memorized. Yet these students don't just pass their exams. They remember these characters 30, 40, even 50 years later. So what's happening here? Are Japanese brains structurally different? Do they possess some genetic advantage? The research says no. What they have is a framework, a daily architecture that transforms temporary information into permanent knowledge. And here's the exciting part. You can implement this exact framework starting today, regardless of what you're trying to learn. The morning foundation, building your mental architecture. Most people approach studying like flipping a light switch. One moment they're scrolling social media, the next they expect their brain to absorb calculus or chemistry. But your mind doesn't work that way. Think of your brain like an engine. You don't go from 0 to 60 instantly. You need a warm-up period. Japanese students understand this intuitively. Their morning isn't about cramming in extra study time. It's about creating the optimal conditions for memory formation. And it starts with something remarkably simple: light exposure. Within the first hour of waking, many Japanese students ensure they get natural sunlight. This isn't about vitamin D or feeling good. It's about biochemistry. When morning light hits your retina, it triggers a cascade of hormonal responses. Your cortisol rises at exactly the right time, which sounds bad until you realize cortisol in the morning is what makes you alert and focused. Simultaneously, this light exposure suppresses melatonin and sets your circadian clock. Why does this matter for memory? Because your hippocampus, the brain region responsible for forming new memories, operates on the circadian rhythm. When your internal clock is synchronized, memory consolidation improves by measurable margins. Studies have shown that students exposed to morning light perform significantly better on memory tests taken later that same day. But the Japanese approach goes further. Many students incorporate gentle physical movement into their morning routine. This isn't about fitness or burning calories, it's about circulation. When you move your body, even just walking or light stretching, you increase blood flow to the prefrontal cortex and hippocampus. Research demonstrates that just 10 minutes of light physical activity can enhance memory encoding by up to 20% for the next several hours. Here's where it gets interesting. Before Japanese students add any new information to their minds, they first retrieve old information. This is the practice of morning recall. Instead of opening a fresh chapter or starting new material, they spend a few minutes testing themselves on yesterday's content. This seems backward to most Western learners. We're obsessed with input. We highlight, we reread, we watch more videos, we consume more content. The Japanese system flips this. They prioritize output. They ask, can you retrieve what you learned yesterday without looking? This morning retrieval serves a dual purpose. First, it strengthens the neural pathways of yesterday's knowledge right before you add new information. Think of it like reviewing the foundation before building the next floor. Second, it identifies gaps immediately. If you can't recall something from yesterday, you know exactly what needs reinforcement before moving forward. There's one more element that surprises many people: the power of ritual. Japanese culture embraces small, deliberate actions that signal importance. Arranging your study space just so, preparing tea with attention, taking 3 deep breaths before beginning. These aren't superstitions, they're psychological anchors. When you perform the same small ritual before studying, you create a mental trigger. Your brain begins to associate that ritual with focus mode. Over time, just performing the ritual shifts your brain into a state optimized for learning. It's classical conditioning applied to education, and it's remarkably effective. The afternoon strategy, working with your brain's natural cycles. Now we reach the heart of the study day, and this is where most students sabotage themselves. The typical approach is to sit down and push through for hours, powered by willpower and caffeine. But willpower is a finite resource, and when it runs out, so does your ability to form lasting memories. Japanese students take a radically different approach. They study in harmony with their brain's ultradian rhythms. Your brain doesn't maintain constant focus. It operates in cycles, approximately 90 to 120 minutes long, with peaks and valleys of attention. Rather than fighting these valleys, Japanese students embrace them. A common pattern is 40 to 50 minutes of intense focus, followed by a 10-minute break. During that break, they're not scrolling phones or watching videos. They're truly resting, walking, stretching, looking at something in the distance, or simply sitting quietly. This seems counterintuitive. Won't taking breaks waste time? Actually, the opposite happens. During those rest periods, your hippocampus enters what neuroscientists call offline processing. Even though you're not actively studying, your brain is replaying what you just learned, strengthening connections, and moving information from short-term to long-term storage. There's a specific technique that Japanese students master, and it's perhaps their most powerful tool. Spaced repetition. Instead of reviewing material randomly or cramming everything the night before test, they follow a precise schedule. Here's how it works. When you first learn something, you review it the next day, then 2 days later, then 4 days later, then a week later, then 2 weeks later. Each review takes less time than the last, but each one dramatically strengthens the memory trace. Why is this so effective? Because memory works through retrieval practice. Every time you successfully recall information, you make that memory stronger and more accessible. But here's the key. The optimal time to review is right before you're about to forget. Too soon, and it's too easy, providing minimal benefit. Too late, and you've already forgotten, forcing you to relearn from scratch. Spaced repetition hits that sweet spot repeatedly. By spacing your reviews at increasing intervals, you're constantly challenging your brain just enough to strengthen the memory without letting it decay. Japanese students apply this to kanji characters, vocabulary, mathematical formulas, historical dates, and virtually everything they need to remember long-term. Another afternoon element that Western students often overlook: nutrition's role in cognitive function. Japanese students typically eat lighter lunches, heavy on vegetables, fish, and rice, light on processed foods and simple sugars. This isn't about health in general. It's specifically about avoiding the post-lunch energy crash. When you eat a heavy, high-glycemic meal, your blood sugar spikes, then crashes. During that crash, your ability to focus and encode memories plummets. By eating foods that provide steady energy, Japanese students maintain consistent cognitive performance throughout the afternoon. There's also a cultural practice of brief mindfulness moments. Even in busy classrooms, students might take a moment to straighten their posture, take a conscious breath, or notice their surroundings. These micro-pauses serve as mental reset buttons, clearing cognitive fatigue before it accumulates into exhaustion. The Western approach pushes through fatigue. The Japanese approach prevents fatigue. And this prevention is what allows Japanese students to maintain their routine day after day, week after week, building knowledge systematically rather than in desperate cramming sessions. The evening seal, locking in your day's learning. Most students think their work is done when they close their textbooks. But Japanese students know that the evening routine is where memory becomes permanent. This is when your brain decides what to keep and what to discard. The practice is simple but crucial: a brief review before sleep, not hours of additional studying. Just 10 to 15 minutes revisiting the day's key points. Why? Because the last information you engage with before sleep receives preferential treatment in memory consolidation. During sleep, particularly during deep sleep stages, your brain undergoes a process called memory consolidation. Your hippocampus replays the day's experiences, decides what's important, and transfers significant information to long-term storage in your cortex. By reviewing right before sleep, you essentially tell your brain, this is important. Keep this. Research on sleep and memory has revealed something remarkable. Students who review material before sleep and then get a full night's rest outperform students who study the same material in the morning and stay awake. Sleep isn't just rest. It's when learning actually becomes knowledge. This is why Japanese students prioritize sleep hygiene with the same seriousness they bring to their study techniques. Dimming lights an hour before bed, avoiding screens that emit blue light, creating a calm pre-sleep routine. These aren't luxuries. They're essential components of effective learning. Every time you sacrifice sleep to study more, you're actually undermining the studying you already did. Without adequate deep sleep, the memories you work to form simply don't consolidate properly. It's like working all day on a document, but never hitting save. Japanese students also embrace the concept of kaizen, continuous improvement through small steps. Rather than overwhelming themselves with massive goals, they set micro-objectives. Learning one new character perfectly, mastering one mathematical proof, understanding one historical event deeply. These small wins accumulate. More importantly, they create positive momentum. When you end each day with a sense of progress, you're more motivated to continue the next day. This is how a routine transforms from something you force yourself to do into something that feels natural and sustainable. There's a Japanese aesthetic principle called which refers to the space between things, the pause, the silence. In the evening, many students incorporate a few minutes of genuine quiet. No music, no podcasts, no studying, just stillness. This isn't wasted time. It's a bridge that allows your nervous system to shift from activation to restoration. When your body is calm, your mind can more effectively process and store the day's information. The truth about sustainable excellence. Here's what strikes me most about the Japanese approach. It's not about intensity, it's about consistency. Western students often operate in extremes: furious cramming followed by burnout, panic before exams followed by relief and forgetting. Japanese students have learned through cultural wisdom what neuroscience is now confirming. Sustainable learning requires rhythm, not force. It's the daily repetition of small, aligned actions that produces extraordinary results over time. Your brain is not your enemy. It's an incredibly sophisticated system that wants to help you learn and remember. But it has rules, biological rules that can't be bypassed through willpower or caffeine. When you work with these rules, memory becomes almost effortless. When you fight them, even enormous effort produces minimal results. So here's my challenge to you. You don't need to implement this entire system tomorrow. Start with one element. Maybe it's getting morning sunlight. Maybe it's taking proper breaks during study sessions. Maybe it's doing a 5-minute review before bed tonight. Choose one thing, do it consistently for a week, and notice what changes. Then add another element, then another. Build your routine the same way Japanese students master kanji, one character at a time, with patience and repetition. The students you admire, the ones who seem to remember everything effortlessly, aren't superhuman. They're working with their biology instead of against it. They've built a system that aligns with how memory actually works. And that system can be yours too, starting tonight.